Hello and welcome to another episode of Let's Talk Trends, brought to you by Caltex Lubricants. I'm your host, Stephen White, and today we're going to be looking at the marvellous world of transportation. It's a world that is undergoing serious challenges, but it's also one that has some great opportunities. And we're going to look at some of the technologies and approaches and possibly new vehicles that are going to be part of these changes. I've got three fantastic experts with me today with various different models in terms of fleet ownership or leasing in the market. We have Zain Paracha from Emirates Transport. We also have Diana Ali from Unilever. And we also have Martin Roberts from Momentum Logistics. Zain, for you, what are the sort of key parameters when it comes to your judging your transportation costs or durability? And
yeah, I feel like the costs are fairly standard, right?
Yeah.
And then they're the same across the industry. So
Yeah.
things like financing, how do you look at depreciation, where policies are quite standard. Maintenance, which we do almost entirely internally. So a lot of efficiencies get driven through that.
Yeah.
But as far as the balance between cost and durability is concerned, there's really a nuance to it insofar as what's right and what's acceptable for the customer. So for our school transport business, for example, there's really not any margin for error at all, right? That is an extremely sensitive business where you have to pay a lot of caution to making sure the right vehicles are on the road, that they're fit for purpose, that the right kind of staff is driving those vehicles, with the right licenses, following regulation. But then there's operations where that it's never a scenario in which you don't stress towards durability or operational resilience, but there are cases where that bar is just a little bit lower. So for us, it's really about kind of fine-tuning those parameters and making sure that we're bringing something to the table that is cost competitive, but then that also stands true to the service parameters.
What does that mean in practice? How have you guys done in the past in terms of when we've had, sometimes like it's this time of year, last year we had sort of quite severe weather here, there's kind of, that can cause disruption to those sorts of services. I mean, how do you guys react in those circumstances?
I feel like what happened last year was truly unprecedented, right? Nobody could have really prepared for it. And it's fair to say that even with all of the general precautions that were taken, there was a lot of impact across the entire fleet. And I think a lot of it was about what happened after that than what happened during. And what happened after that is we really tried to strengthen different segments of relationships that we have. So naturally with the companies that we work with for our insurance and for our financing, but then also with our suppliers, we tried to focus a lot on our portfolio to make sure that contingency planning, disaster recovery planning, these things are really front and center in terms of the service levels that we're able to provide to our customers eventually.
What's the benefit for Diana to bring us on board to do transport if there's no benefit to Unilever? So there's got to be benefit. Now that doesn't mean there's got to be financial benefit, but there's got to be benefit there. So we've got to give them a value add.
But do you feel you get that as well from your suppliers? Because obviously it's a chain here, aren't we, we're describing here.
100%. As Zain says, when we go and procure tyres and things like this, we're not just a customer. We're a partner to them. We buy their product off them, but then they support us in other ways, whether that's with workshop equipment, whether that's with training for our tyre fitters and things like that, whether it's coming and doing fleet checks and giving us feedback on, they'll often come around and they'll do a random tyre pressure check and see what we've got, what percentage of the fleet's overinflated, underinflated, what's right. That kind of value add.
Diana, I want to talk to you a little bit about I guess you wouldn't describe it like this, but from my point of view, I think of you as a pioneer when it comes to the fact that you are, I don't know if you're the first owner of an electric truck.
We're the first to introduce
operator
electric truck,
or whatever.
in the Middle East and in UAE. This is a global direction, and without the leadership, support, and belief in cutting emissions and reaching zero emissions by 2039. This was the main driver behind our decision. We wanted to pave the roads for other companies as well to follow our approach and to, as you said, education is part of
Were
the
you
journey.
worried that first time? Maybe you thought, maybe will it work
We
properly?
were, yeah, of course, and there were some pushbacks and resistance that how are we gonna use it? We don't have the experience, the charging infrastructure, the TCO, so lots of challenges. But again, we need to have a role model.
Well, you're useful now for everybody else because they can
it's
tell
true,
now
it's
whether or
true.
not
Everyone
this
is
is
approaching
feasible.
to learn.
I think it's even harder in this region because if you look at Europe and the fuel price in Europe, and then you look at the fuel price here, that saving element's not there on the fuel costs, on that operating costs.
That's
you know,
very true.
in Europe you've got some fuel cost saving, whereas here it's kind of negligible because the fuel is so cheap.
In Europe, it makes sense, and it's very easy to go into electric. But as Martin mentioned here, it is challenging. There is no taxes. The fuel is not expensive. So this will take us to the point of incentives, having regulations. So all of this will support the journey of.
Do you think we'll see more companies like Unilever demanding their truck transporter to supply them with? It's like it's actually
not true. There is also a push from the government, and there are initiatives that are during the COP28. So they are supporting the electrification. They are working on the infrastructure. We have groups of multiple organizations working together, and there are interests to move into electric.
I mean, I don't know if Emmett's Transport, you've obviously got your own strategy in place. Sort of what steps are you guys taking now in terms of decarbonisation?
We really see ourselves in a service business, right? So at the end of the day, it's all about,
I guess, what
the
your
customer
needs,
wants.
right?
Putting an option on the table that makes sense for the customer. So there's no sense in trying to push a decarbonization agenda unless that's a natural demand that's being created in the market. And I think it goes back to the parallels that we drew with Europe, which is it's not just about the fuel prices or the regulation or the subsidies. It's so many things that contribute. So variable tariffs of electricity, organizations can actually plan their charge times around when it makes most sense. And then the fact that there is a consistency and a lot of cross-border movement happening. We're taking all of those steps as a region, right? And I think 2024 and 2025 have been interesting years in the sense that the announcements that DEVA made last year should see a lot more charge point operators coming in this year. We're seeing mandates coming now federally that are creating some checks and balances on various ministries and authorities and private entities. And these mandates are now, looking to at least make sure that companies are monitoring their emissions, that they are reporting their emissions. And that's really step one, right? Until until you're getting someone to monitor these things, report them and get audited on them, you won't really get any kind of practical implementation where they're trying actively to reduce these numbers. And not all of them are from transport, but we're seeing them create intent, right? And now come to us and say, hey, what if? And naturally, a lot of times, bringing the TCO into it, the fact of the matter is that EVs today, like really talking about the real options, they don't commercially compare to an electric, to an ICE vehicle. They cannot, because they cannot perform as much operationally and you cannot be as flexible with them. Plus, then there are no incentives and then fuel is cheap. But it's moving in the right direction, right? Battery technology, charging technology, the number of options on the table, the fact that you're getting different options at different price points. And you can really take that balance between quality and cost, right? So you don't need the best vehicle in all cases.
And the big concern with electric vehicles is, end of life. What happens to all these batteries at the end of life? We looked for a customer of putting a lease vehicle in on an electric side. Then we look at it. We've got to fully depreciate that vehicle and add that into the lease cost because in 8 years' time, the vehicle might be worth nothing. It's a gamble at the moment because it's all quite new. It's a gamble for us as an operator to take that challenge.
Does it feel like a gamble to you?
Technology is improving, and there are new battery technologies coming in. So we're looking forward to hear what's coming.
But
interesting,
especially in this region with the heat that we have through the summer and everything else, and that certain manufacturers that have got electric vehicles in other parts of the world that are not bringing their electric vehicle here.
Well,
because of their concerns.
Very prominent European ones are.
Exactly, and their concern is about this temperature and everything else, and how that's going to affect it. And we're not going to know till a few years down the line what
it's a learning curve.
impacts are.
Yeah. I think it's an interesting one because I think, well, actually quite often with trucks, before they get just, let's say, ICE trucks or whatever, you're talking, they actually often get like a couple of million kilometres under the clock before they even sort of, in terms of testing, height of summer, then they come into the market. And actually, I'm not sure we've seen that level of testing for this type of technology.
Yeah.
I mean, apart from obviously pioneers like yourselves,
it's
are
just
actually
not
doing
enough time, and all of this plugs back into the TCO, right? And these are
TCO.
all reasons why the numbers look the way they do, and everyone has a slightly different version of the numbers, but I'd like to believe that anyone that's done their homework will roughly be looking at the same numbers. So for us, if someone's coming to us and saying we want to do an 8-year electric lease, a lot of times, not only do we look at the residual value as practically zero, because a lot of the second life opportunities for these vehicles exist outside the UAE, and you don't really see a market for used electric trucks in East Africa, for example.
Not yet.
Right?
Because the infrastructure's just not there yet, is it? So
But the infrastructure is not here, and it's not there. And you're also, over and above that residual value impact, a lot of times you're also, to plan for battery degradation and the service level, you're also thinking about, okay, maybe 4 years in, I'm going to have to replace all of the batteries, or at least half of the batteries. And as we all know, it's common knowledge, those are pretty much half the cost of the vehicle, right? So you're saying, I'm going to buy a vehicle and a half, it's going to be worth practically zero. And how much can you practically really save on maintenance? All of these things are improving very quickly. And we have seen them improve very quickly. And I think there's a lot of work happening on second life of batteries, on charging speeds, on charge capacities within the vehicles, we're seeing now vehicles with 1 million kilometers in warranty, electric vehicles, and I think all of that creates
it makes it reassure you in terms of like whether or not that's a good choice or not. I do think that we should also be still working hard to make sure what we do have in terms of like the fleet or whatever in nationally. I do think we need to make sure that is operating with as few emissions as it possibly can, as well maintained as it.
When it comes to emissions and what we're looking at there, is a lot of it just comes down to that cost and finding customers that are willing to pay the additional cost. You know, our trucks can run on 100% biofuel, but biofuel is nearly 4 times the cost of normal diesel. So you find a customer that we want to do the right thing, we want to be green, but we don't want to pay extra.
I saw Lutar actually again.
It's just not possible.
It doesn't have to come with a cost all the time. You can do backhauling. You can. It doesn't have to be hydrogen or electric. You can reduce emissions. Moving into Euro 5, it's 70% less than Euro.
Exactly.
2, Euro
That's
3.
most of our fleet.
So upgrading your engine, working on backhauling, going and coming full.
I feel like the silver bullet here, and maybe we've kind of covered this space, but is hydrogen. That's an opinion that I personally also, us at Emirates Transport, we really maintain. It not only does it make a lot of sense for this region, but there's some great research online about how in the next decade and a half, this region, so the UAE, Saudi, and the Gulf in general, is expected to have some of the cheapest hydrogen in the world.
There's lots of parallels between the oil and gas industry and how this could potentially work as well in terms of the.
So there's grey hydrogen, but then there's also the solar component, which is fully green hydrogen that's generated entirely out of solar. And the work to do on the infrastructure is significantly less, right? Because you're already seeing the CNG infrastructure in most parts across the country, and it's a bit of a patience game where you're waiting for different things to catch up, and mainly for the mass scale production of the hydrogen atom to become feasible for the folks that will manufacture.
I don't think there's any doubt that it will at some point.
Will.
And that's a wrap. In transportation, the right partners keep things moving. Caltex lubricants ensure smoother rides, fewer stops, and a lasting performance. Visit their website to learn more, me.caltexlubricants.com, or join their network. A huge thank you for all our guests for joining us today. And if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like, share, and follow Caltex Middle East. Until next time, see you soon.